Good evening. It's Sunday, the 26th of October. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Police forces further bolstered their presence in the capital today in additional efforts to curb the violence currently plaguing the city. IBA's Margot Dukevich reports.
Tensions in Jerusalem remained high today ahead of the funeral for Abdelrahman Shaloudi, the terrorist who rammed his car into pedestrians at a light rail station Wednesday, killing 3-month-old baby Chaya Zissel Brown and injuring 8 others. Last night, a Jerusalem court agreed to a police request to postpone Shaloudi's funeral until this evening and restrict the number of mourners to 20. Meanwhile, in an effort to restore calm to the capital that has been plagued by violence for weeks, police deployed an additional 1,000 troops in Jerusalem's streets, hoping to curb the unrest. Today, stones were thrown at the light rail system near the East Jerusalem suburb Beit Hanina. No one was injured, but damage was caused to windows. Reports, meanwhile, that Housing Minister Uri Ariel plans to rent an apartment in the predominantly Arab East Jerusalem neighborhood Silwan is expected to add fuel to an already inflammable situation. The East Jerusalem neighborhood made headlines last week when 9 Jewish families took possession of 2 buildings. Their entry generated harsh condemnation, with Peace Now accusing the Israeli government of preventing a 2-state solution and Palestinians accusing Israel of stealing their land.
With the support of the Israeli government, the settler movement are investing a lot of money and efforts in order to change the situation in East Jerusalem and to annex the East Jerusalem neighborhoods into Jerusalem. The main goal of this movement is to prevent the 2-state solution by preventing any kind of a reasonable solution in the city of Jerusalem and actually making the Arab communities and the Arab neighborhoods half Jewish, and by doing that, preventing the chance to have a Palestinian capital in East Jerusalem.
This is settler colonization. That is, once an Israeli buys a territory in the West Bank, it becomes a military zone that the Israeli government protects or controls, and it becomes part of the negotiations with the Israelis about the future territory of the Palestinian state. It is packed with politics. It is packed with an attempt to take away our land, and it is designed basically to end our claim to our land.
The entry of the Jewish families in Silwan was said to have been organized by a Teret Kohanim, a religious organization that purchases properties from Arabs in the Old City and East Jerusalem. The organization's spokesman said Jerusalem should not be divided.
I imagine there's some Arabs that don't accept any Jews in this region. There's no shortage of Arabs that want to drive us into the sea still. There are some Arabs that still don't believe that we have rights on the Temple Mounds or that Jerusalem shouldn't be divided.
Well, it's absurd. There's nowhere in the world, not in New York, not in Los Angeles, not in London or Paris, that people ask if people are allowed to live or not live according to the religion or race. Houses are houses, and people are people. If somebody buys, a Jew buys from a Jew, an Arab buys from an Arab buys from a Jew from an Arab, everything is allowed. It's a democracy. And when Jews want to acquire a house, and live in it, they could do that anywhere else they want in the world, and of course they will be able to do that in the city of Jerusalem.
Margot Dukevich, IBA News.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu opened today's weekly cabinet meeting by blaming Islamic extremists with trying to ignite Jerusalem and vowed that Israel will do whatever it takes to ensure that they do not succeed. Netanyahu indicated that the government will act with all the force, determination, and responsibility necessary to restore calm. He also spoke about the heightened security presence in Jerusalem and asked for wide support from all the nation's citizens to help guard the capital. Netanyahu finished by saying that the reality of rock throwing and rioting in Jerusalem will never be accepted. IBA's Eli Wogelenter spoke with several members of Knesset today and asked them what they would do to stop the attacks in the city.
We need to fight about all the terror organization and all the terror attacks against the Israelis. And what we need to do is to be stronger in how we're behaving against them, and there's a lot of work to do in there.
First of all, I would like to ask the government to support the Minister of the Interior Security, the police, of course, to give them the right equipment, to help them, to assist them, and to give them the finance and also the main power they need in order to act and to bring security to all the citizens in Jerusalem.
For over a year, we are talking with Aronovich here in the Knesset and tell him that there is a small intifada in Jerusalem, and citizens are getting stones on their cars every day almost. And it had to be dealt with it when it was like small activity. And so just I think, to find the people who are doing it, to put them in jail, I think it will help.
There's no doubt that any situation where rocks are being thrown on citizens of a country, bottles filled with flames and the like, the response has to be immediate, it has to be strong, and there has to be zero tolerance, because as we've seen, the moment you let that go, things can escalate to, unfortunately, far worse scenarios and tragedies. So that's first of all. There also, at the same time, for sure, has to be discussion and reaching out as best we can to their leadership about the situation. But even more importantly, I feel that there are parts of Yerushalayim and parts of Jerusalem, like Gilo, like Ramot, where in any final settlement with the Palestinians, we know they're going to be part of Israel, and we need to be building. There has to be construction in those areas. That, I believe, will relieve pressure on all sides. It will relieve pressure even from the extremist side on the Jewish side, and also it will relieve some of this tension that we have that the Arabs are building in huge numbers throughout Jerusalem, and we on the Jewish side or not. I think it would be better for all sides to sort of put that tension aside and actually free up construction in those areas that are really not disputed.
For starters, they should stop provoking the Arab society in Jerusalem and the Palestinian society in Jerusalem, because that is the cause for the latest horrible things that have been happening in Jerusalem. I don't know what they want to gain by actually provoking them so straightforward and so really terribly, because what it brings all over again is war, not only in the borders of Israel, but also inside the borders of Israel, within society. Is this government trying to tear this society apart even more than it is already on the verge of being torn?
After the postponement of several school trips from Tel Aviv to the capital slated for this week, Jerusalem Deputy Mayor Rachel Azaria expressed outrage over the decision while speaking with IBA's Margot Dukavich.
First, I think it's outrageous, and there's no reason to cancel these tours. These tours are to the Knesset, to the Supreme Court, and to the Kotel. The tours are, some of them are on the way to Jerusalem, the different places that were from the War of Independence. There's no reason for this. It is not, it's not taking responsibility. It's not being it's not showing any solidarity towards the residents of Jerusalem. And if our children this morning woke up and went to their kindergartens and their schools, and everything is as usual in Jerusalem, there's no reason it shouldn't be the same way for the children that live in Tel Aviv.
Have other communities or towns in Israel followed suit?
No one. No one did. I think it was a decision of the municipality in Tel Aviv that thought again that they live in a separate kind of area. I don't know how to call it even. I don't think it is I don't think the residents of Tel Aviv feel the same way. I think many of them were very surprised by that decision. Maybe there was a small group that put some pressure, but you could tell that small group, so just don't join the class if you're scared that your children, whatever. The classes should have come here. Now it's very hard to reschedule because everything is fully booked, and this decision was a decision that is just outrageous.
Knesset members IBA's Eli Wogelenter spoke with today also had strong opinions about the decision by Tel Aviv schools to postpone visits to Jerusalem.
That's terrible. That's terrible. I can understand parents that would like to see that they have the children going to visit Jerusalem and the security issue is taken care of. I can understand. If there is a problem in one place, okay, you can move from one place to another, but to cancel the whole tour, the whole trip to Jerusalem, that's terrible. We cannot accept this.
It's a terrible thing. Jerusalem is a center, and Jerusalem is a capital of the state of Israel, and I don't understand why those people are so coward and they're afraid to come to Jerusalem.
This government, instead of making Jerusalem, which has every potential of being the capital of tourism of the world, for every possible reason, it turns into the exact opposite. It turns into the capital of war of the world. Really, it is terrible for everyone, and this government should really take its blindfold off its eyes and see what it's doing, and if not, it should really be gone as soon as possible.
I don't think it's a political statement. I think that there is a fear. People in Jerusalem right now are living with fear of, we go to this place or that place. Who knows if some resident of East Jerusalem, who as of late has associations with Hamas, will do something terrible. So I can understand the decision as a temporary decision until order is restored. And then after that, I hope that school after school from all over the country will come and make sure that their students visit our eternal capital of Jerusalem.
I think it's horrible. As a mother for a child that learn in the system in Tel Aviv, I think we should go and visit and have trips in Jerusalem. There is no really problem and issue about it, and I'm calling from here maybe to Ron Huldai, please approve the trips.
Fallout continues in the aftermath of the Islamist terror attacks in Sinai on Friday that killed at least 30 Egyptian soldiers and wounded 25 others. Egypt is blaming Hamas for the cross-border aiding and abetting of the terrorists. Senior Egyptian diplomats today announced that the indirect ceasefire talks between Israeli and Hamas officials will not be resumed in Cairo tomorrow as slated. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is reportedly now considering the creation of a security corridor a few kilometers wide along its entire border with Gaza that would involve the demolition of homes and other structures to ensure the complete destruction of any remaining tunnels from Gaza into Sinai. Earlier, Egypt closed the Rafah border crossing and declared a 3-month state of emergency in parts of the northern Sinai where the latest round of violence erupted. During an address to his nation yesterday, Sisi declared that the assailants were foreign-funded and that the attacks were carried out in attempts to demoralize Egyptians. A mother of 6 was murdered in Ramla in what police suspect was a so-called honor killing by her relatives. Butaina Abu Ghanem is the 9th female member of her family to have been killed over the past 14 years. An unknown assailant opened fire at the 31-year-old woman while she was parked in her car in the central town. She suffered a severe head injury and was pronounced dead shortly after being rushed to the Asaf Rofeh hospital. The victim divorced her husband several years ago and had been living with her mother in the city since that time. Police are now searching for her ex-husband. Members of the Abu Ghanem family have been indicted and charged for 2 of the previous 8 murders. In addition, one of the victim's sisters, a teenager named Dalia, went missing in 2008, and her whereabouts remain unknown. In other news, India is set to sign a deal with Israel for the purchase of some 8,000 Spike guided anti-tank missiles and more than 300 rocket launchers at a cost of $525 million. New Delhi's defense ministry rejected a rival offer to buy Javelin missiles from the U.S. Lockheed Martin and Raytheon corporations. The decision was announced following a meeting of India's Defense Acquisition Council, chaired by Defense Minister Arun Jaitley, who told those gathered that the Republic's paramount concern is national security. The Spike missile, known as Gil in Hebrew, is produced by the Rafael Advanced Defense Systems and is suited for several platforms, multiple ranges, and a variety of targets. The fire and forget missile is carried by infantry troops and is capable of locking onto a target before being launched. The weapons can be operated day and night in adverse weather conditions and are able to strike targets with pinpoint precision. The academic year opened today with hundreds of thousands of students returning to university and college campuses across the country. Studies, however, are being hard hit by government budget cuts on education to fund spending during last summer's conflict in Gaza. We get more from IBA's Ario O'Sullivan.
Some 65 universities and colleges opened their campuses today, where over 310,000 students will seek a higher education and degrees. The number of students this year, however, is almost the same as last year, with less than a 1% growth. Israeli universities are some of the best schools in the world, but changes in demographics and the economy have led to more and more students heading toward colleges where acceptance is easier. Still, the unexpected stress on Israel's economy due to the 50-day Operation Protective Edge against Hamas in Gaza this past summer led to a nearly 700 million shekel cut to the Education Ministry's budget. This means higher tuitions and other increased expenses for students. They've turned to their parents for help.
Recently, my dad he saw that I'm struggling, so he suggested to pay for the tuition. I'm looking for options now. I hope I can find a job that will enable me to study and do it well and have enough time for school and work. It's going to be very hard. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Ironically, many of these students fought as reservists during the summer, not only risking their lives, but sacrificing their time that they could have been working and earning money for school.
It's not also the living, it's also the prices of, the prices of everything is changing and goes up and up. And it's something that you have to accept. My studies are also costing me a lot of money.
While college tuition in Israel is relatively low compared to the rest of the Western world, it's still a challenge to pay for school.
That Israel is a small country. Because we have a limited budget, a very significant part of this budget actually goes to defense investments. And as a result, because you have just a small blanket, if more goes to defense, less goes to other areas, such as education, such as healthcare, civic development, and things of the sort. So things become more expensive, more difficult, because more of the budget goes to defense.
The increased financial costs may force many students to study abroad, which could lead to a brain drain for Israel and a further blow to the economy. Aryeh O'Sullivan for IBA News.
President Reuven Rivlin today attended the 58th annual memorial ceremony commemorating the massacre in the Israeli Arab city of Kfar Qassam, making history by becoming the first president to ever do so. On the eve of the 1956 war, border police shot to death 49 residents who were unaware that a curfew had been imposed. Speaking at the ceremony, Rivlin harshly condemned the massacre and called it a terrible crime that weighs heavily on Israel's collective conscience. He added that it is a duty to face what happened directly so that it can be taught and lessons can be learned. While former President Shimon Peres formerly expressed regret in 2007 over the massacre, Kfar Qassam residents were receptive to the even clearer message from Rivlin, who came to the city to participate in the service. Despite border police claims after the war that the victims had posed a security risk, the court found that the order to fire at civilians was blatantly illegal and sentenced them to many years in prison for failure to defy it, as other units in the area had. None of those found guilty served full terms in prison, and many were later pardoned. Rivlin emphasized the importance of preserving positive ties between Arabs and Jews, stressing that the Arab population is an inseparable part of the nation and that all citizens are destined to live side by side. The last U.S. Marines and British combat troops officially ended their operations in Afghanistan today as they packed up to leave the country and transferred a massive military base to the Afghan army. The American and British flags were lowered for a final time at the regional Camp Leatherneck headquarters, 13 years after toppling the radical Islamic Taliban regime in what has been America's longest war. The coalition combat mission will officially conclude at the end of the year, at which time most of the fighting against the current Taliban insurgency will be left to the army and the police. There have been fierce battles in recent months, and concerns are rising over the ability of the Afghan forces to hold off the Taliban without intelligence and air support from the U.S. and its allies. The Allied troops' presence swelled to 140,000 in 2010 and will be reduced to around 12,000 trainers and advisors by January 1st. Running battles in North Lebanon between the army and Islamist militants have left at least 14 dead over the past 24 hours. Security forces and emergency services today confiscated weapons and extinguished fires in Tripoli following Saturday clashes that included explosions and gunfire in a second day of intense fighting. Lebanon's second largest city has become a stronghold for hardline Lebanese Sunni Islamists and Syrian rebels who accuse the army of working with the Shiite Hezbollah group, which has deployed forces across the border to fight Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Tripoli residents have endured some of the worst spillover violence from the civil war in Syria, including frequent gun battles, bombings, and abductions. And on the ground in Syria, Islamic State forces launched a new offensive against Kobani. Airstrikes by the U.S.-led coalition destroyed an ISIS artillery position yesterday that had been used to pound the strategic town in an earlier assault. Residents just across the border in Turkey gathered to watch the strike and could clearly see the rising of smoke as explosions were heard. Fighters from the Kurdish People's Protection Unit, known as the YPG, are claiming to have regained control of the nearby Tal Sha'ir Hill from the Islamic State, and video posted online shows the raising of their yellow flag in the area. Other images are said to be of the weapons, ammunition, identity cards, and extremist literature seized from the radical jihadis that they killed and whose bodies were piled in the back of trucks. Here at home and in local basketball tonight, Israel Television's Game of the Week will pit Maccabi Haifa against Hapoel Tel Aviv. This is the Northerners' first league game since spending almost 2 weeks playing exhibition matches against NBA teams. Haifa lost all 4 encounters, although in the final game against the Toronto Raptors, the game led by 5 points midway through the fourth quarter before losing 92-85. Hapoel Tel Aviv is coming off a heartbreaking 81-80 defeat at the hands of Hapoel Jerusalem and will be looking to even its league record at 2-2. All the action starts live from Haifa on Israel Television Channel 1 at 8:45 p.m. Taking a look at local finance, and with no currency trading on Sundays, the shekel remains the same, while share prices on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange were up across the board on this first day of the trading week. Here's a look at the late afternoon numbers. The IBA weather team is telling us that there will be cooler conditions over the next several days, with the possibility of isolated rain showers returning by Monday. Here's what we can expect at home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this evening. I'll be back to bring you the latest news from Israel tomorrow at 6 p.m. because our broadcast is being delayed due to special coverage for the opening of the Knesset winter session. So don't forget that 6 o'clock tomorrow evening. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great night and shalom from Jerusalem.